Absolutely. I was just thinking, as we're talking about lawyers who are up against it in real ways. There was a lawyer who died by suicide last month in New York. He was known as the nightlife lawyer, and he was indicted in a multi-million dollar fraud scheme, and he ended his life. And when we as practitioners are chasing the shiny objects, the money and the fame and the social circles and the rest of it. I mean, we're human.
Hello.
Hello and welcome. My name is Andrea Park. I'm a mother and an author and mindset coach and mentor.
And I'm Alexis Dimitrio. I'm a New York-based fashion designer.
And this is How I Escaped Prison. It's a podcast where we share real stories of overcoming mental and emotional barriers. Join us as we explore challenges life throws at us and how we found freedom by escaping the prisons of our own minds. Today, we have a special guest, Miss Michelle Thompson. She's a coach and a former and an attorney as well. And I would like to invite Michelle to introduce herself and tell us about her great work she's doing.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I'm Michelle Thompson with Resistant Vision Coaching and Consulting. And my first rodeo was as a lawyer. I practiced law for 7 years, and I left because I wanted to become a parent. And I was working 70 to 90 hours a week. I couldn't stay awake without coffee. I couldn't go to sleep without alcohol. Um, and I couldn't manage the social anxiety I came across without cigarettes. And I figured that I wasn't going to have a child but a heart attack, and that was not exactly the path I was open to. So I left law only to I just by decision I decided to earn a doctorate in history. So that's how I went from Washington, D.C. in the U.S. to New York City. And I did that. By 2012, I had a doctorate in history, and I worked. I don't know. My hours were crazy because I commuted, and if you know the New York City area, like I was teaching at two schools in Staten Island and one in New Jersey. So that's like it's a nightmare. And I lived in Manhattan, right? It's a nightmare commute. And I was earning about the same, well, less than I was earning when I was a lawyer. And I said, I'm doing it again. This is not working for me. Um, and I actually was on the brink of suicide. And thank God I had a community of people who were really good at listening to me and providing me with, just like, and just really staying with me while I was going through this. It's a peer counseling network, right? So I would do the same for them. And then I started to think about like, okay, what are some ways out here? And my first thought was, okay, all right, I'll do journalism. I was going through the same thing that academia was going through. So it's like, okay, no, because I don't want another degree. I don't need to do that. Um, and then I realized that I had this experience with the peer counseling network, and I thought, I this is great. And I'm doing this as a volunteer. How do I get paid to do this? And as soon as I had the thought, there was an email that said, we are providing scholarships to learn how to become a coach. And I said, I'm not entirely sure what a coach does, but I think that's calling my name. So I applied for the scholarship. It turns out the person who's running it had been in the same peer counseling organization I was in years ago, and he like approved the scholarship. And I got it, and I learned how to become a coach, and I haven't looked back since then. I started my business when it was Michelle Thompson Coaching and Consulting. I worked with scholars to publish for graduation, tenure, promotion, and grants. And in the last couple of years, I've been shifting back to my original field of law, and working with lawyers, in part because I keep hearing these stories about lawyers who want to end their lives because of how the practice is. And I'm like, I thought y'all haven't figured that out in 20 years. Okay, fine. I'm back in the ring. But also academia has gotten so it's a rough time in academia. People don't have the resources they need to do what they want, and there's more on their plates and less help to do it. And that could be money, it could be bodies in the room. And things are getting really, really hard there. And I was like, I can't because the industry looks like it's kind of collapsing. There's not a lot I can do here. So I can help. I can do my part to help lawyers achieve work-life balance.
Yeah. I guess it was meant to be for you to not to practice law, but to help lawyers.
Exactly, exactly,
You
exactly.
look so young. I don't know when you had all the time to do all these things, all of these different careers. I, I thought like the end was gonna the history, then you came in with the coaching. That's a lot.
Well,
Kudos.
thank you. In 2 weeks I'll be 56.
Oh, God
You
bless.
look great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I mean,
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
hope I look like you at 56.
I'm so flattered. Oh, awesome. Excellent.
yeah, that's fantastic. And you know that I'm a former attorney
Right.
and that I was forced to change because I took a path, as you said, of working and having my own practice and looking for titles and all the things that were I created an image in my
Mm-hmm.
mind of what a successful attorney should look like.
Mm-hmm.
A big office, employees, a nice car,
Mm-hmm.
nice clothing. And I worked and my daughter in private school. I mean, it was part of the image. And didn't, I had several signs, but I didn't
Mm-hmm.
stop.
Right.
I continued and I pushed.
So many lawyers do that,
And
right? They just keep going and
yes,
going and going. Yeah.
yeah. And I feel blessed now that I have a very happy life. I it were a few rough years, but it, it was part of my transformation, and now I am happy with my life and with
Mm-hmm.
what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm truly happy and feel blessed of what happened because if I stayed there, I don't think that would have ended. My life would have been as nice as it is right now.
Absolutely. I was just thinking, as we're talking about lawyers who are up against it in real ways. There was a lawyer who died by suicide last month in New York. He was known as the nightlife lawyer, and he was indicted in a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme, and he ended his life. And when we as practitioners are chasing the shiny objects, the money and the fame and the social circles and the rest of it. I mean, we're human. Like it's like I'm not mad at him. Like I'm not. It is what it is. We chase the things that we chase, right? And
Yeah.
we don't go to law school to be broke. I can just be honest about that, right? We are hoping to have a salary that really pays us well.
Yeah.
And when we chase only these things and we leave bits and pieces of ourselves behind, it really goes. It just goes it goes sideways. It's funny, I represent women mostly, but I had another person came to mind. I went to law school with him, and he did really amazing work. He worked for the department. He worked at the Department of Justice, and he helped track down hardcore drug dealers in Mexico across the border and prosecute them. He had a major alcohol addiction, right? And that actually killed he that's how that killed him. Um, And we had a reunion this year, and people were, we just kind of held space for him because he wasn't there. But
Yeah.
like it's,
Yeah.
I know, and I think actually in his case, it wasn't so much that he was chasing something. I think it was that work is so
So,
hard, and there's where are you gonna go and tell people? Where are you gonna unload that? Like where are you gonna tell people? Like, geez, and today, and I can't
yeah.
even imagine. I can't even like he probably disappeared for months on end because he can't be found, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Growing
That's
up, having my mom being a lawyer,
Hmm.
everybody always asks you, what do you want to be when you grow up? My answer was always anything but a lawyer.
Right.
Just seeing
Right.
her running around all the time and just seeing the way that that affects her and the life she lives, anything but a lawyer. That was always my answer from when I was a little girl.
I
And
believe you.
I mean, it's this crazy for a little kid to notice such something like that, then it has a big impact.
It's a hard life in many. I mean, there are many lawyers who actually have set up wonderful practices and actually have created full lives for themselves, right? It's not just all client work all the time, and many can't figure out how to do it. I was actually just thinking about who was I? God, someone else came to mind. Oh, I know. I was talking to a partner at one of these major firms. He was based out of Arizona, and he said that when he talks to Gen Z and they say, and he asks them, are you interested in becoming partner? They go, no, I don't like your life. I think that's amazing in a big firm for like to have a generation who's like, nah, keep it. I think that's fantastic.
yeah. 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 I
So there'd
mean,
be there'd be fewer children looking at their parents
they
going, what
they
is this?
know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually a great thing in life to know what you don't want.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
I mean, it's okay not to know what you want, but it's best to know what you don't want and to stay away from it.
At
Because
least
what
they are
if,
guardrails. When you can do that, you
yeah,
actually have
yeah,
guardrails.
yeah, and
Absolutely.
eventually what's for you is gonna come to you
Right.
if you're open enough. But if you stay away from what you don't want, you're safe.
It's very, very true.
Yeah.
And most of us don't
Yeah.
decide what we don't want, which is
Yeah,
unfortunate.
yeah, 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 yeah. And it's super interesting that you said that there's so many great attorneys that have great lives. But the work that we are doing is for the people that work crazy hours and don't take care of themselves
Absolutely.
because they are not, and I'm talking now from my experience because I was there.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't mindful of my peace,
Hmm.
of what I really wanted. I
Right.
didn't have a clear why of literally why am I an attorney?
Hmm. Hmm.
Because I'm not, if you really true have you have purpose and meaning behind the practice of law, and you're not only chasing money and titles and success and do everything and anything to win a case. Um, if you're looking at the true meaning of the practice of law, then you find a why, and then you have meaning, you give meaning to your own life.
Exactly. I always, when I practice, I never practice for firms. Actually, knowing what you don't want, like that was me. It's like firms and I don't share the same values. And I didn't realize it was a 90-hour work week that, that I didn't share values with. I didn't know that as well, but I did know that I didn't like what they did. And so my very first job was working with people who this will date me, right? People who were HIV, had an HIV diagnosis, and they weren't able to get, their health insurance was jeopardized. People, they were losing their jobs. Like that was the work I did for a couple of years, help people get public benefits so they could actually have health insurance. And then where I worked, we organized in a labor union. And I actually started working with the labor union who organized us when I had a fellowship and that fellowship ended. So I I worked for a labor union, and I loved the work. And that's actually, I think for me, ironically, that's what drove me working so many hours and so hard, and like using everything I could get my hands on so I could do the work, because I was so committed to doing that work. I was so determined to make sure workers had good contracts and that the terms of their contracts were the way they wanted it. That was the first thing I woke up thinking about in the morning, and the last thing I thought about when I went to bed, after I had a glass of wine that could actually put me to sleep. Right? So like that. So it can cut both. It could cut both ways. And I'm thinking about my colleague, right, who's chasing down drug dealers in Mexico, right? Like his work, he had he
His
had
entire
purpose
life
and he
was
knew what he was
that.
doing,
Yeah.
right? But for those of us who are more inclined to like throw ourselves fully into that, like how do we pull ourselves back, right? How do we actually say like you can't? Here's the thing. If you're in that position, if you're chasing the shiny lights, it's like, okay, that take a moment and actually think about like what do you actually really want? Like if that stuff fell apart tomorrow, what is it that you would actually want, and who is it who that you'd be? But for those of us who are like, I have to save the people, right? And that was very me. Um, I think what would I have to face? And I mean I did face it, right? Like what do I have to know that I can't serve people from an empty cup? Like what would
Yeah.
have gone better if I actually really nurtured myself as I did that work? And that's what I teach people now. Like, how do I set up my time? How do I say
Mm.
no to people? How do I set boundaries? How do I, like that's a lot of what I do with people, in addition to helping to call their nervous systems using tapping or EFT. Um, but like that's the question I would have to ask a practitioner for myself. Like, you can't, this is great and lovely. Kudos, and you can't do this, right? And I knew that, right? There's no child happening in this body the way that I'm treating it.
No, I have a question, and this may be a little personal, but why did you not know how to say no? And why did you not know how to set up boundaries for yourself?
That's a really good question. I mean, I was in my early and mid 30s at the time, and I think, and it was a newer job, right? At that point. And I think I had to prove myself. I had to prove myself to the officers of the union. I was very determined to show that you made an investment with me and it's going to pay off. I think another part of it though was that, so I was working based out of Baltimore, Maryland, in a predominantly Black labor union, and I was raised very middle class. And if you're a healthcare worker in the United States, we weren't representing doctors and nurses. We were representing people like the care assistants and the housekeepers and the janitors, and they're very, very working class, and they were skeptical of me. I get it. I understand. I'm not mad, right? But I also had to prove myself to them. And so I didn't want to say no, right? If I said no, then they'd be like, nah, right? And then they complain to the president. And I wanted to show them that I was committed to what they were going through. Um, all of that is very external, right? It's a setup and it's very external.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
actually, given that I have that propensity to want to prove myself to people, I'm really glad I didn't work for a firm. That would have broke me. It would have completely broke me. But yeah, no, that's why.
I wanted to ask you, what was the trigger when you said that's it? I'm changing things in my life because this is not going to end well.
I mean, yeah, no, it's funny. I'm like putting the cart before the horse. I think it was knowing I wanted to become a mother. I think that was the trigger. I remember driving. Actually, so my first thought was, oh, okay, get a PhD in public health. Not a PhD, a master's in public health is what I was thinking. I could do that. And then I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. Um, but I remember driving from Baltimore to Annapolis one night because I was going out to Annapolis to work at a bargaining table. And I'm in the car and I'm playing like I'm like I could actually like feel I could feel the presence of this child in the car, right? Like didn't exist, but it's like, oh yeah, this is gonna be a thing. And I started crying because I'm like, I only earn $40,000 a year. I have no idea how I'm gonna pay for daycare. I have no idea how that's gonna happen. Um, and if I pay for daycare, it's 6:30 and I'm on my way to Annapolis. How am I going to pick up my child? And what am I going to do with my child, right? Like this is no way for a child to be. And between the time not working and the money not working, like am I going to bring my child to work with me every single day? That seems nuts, right? Between both of those things, I was like this is unfeasible. This is completely unfeasible. Um, and it was an awakening. Like it wasn't, it's not just becoming a mother. It's like, how do I mother myself well enough to actually pull off a job like that? It was, it was because you have to be right. There's so many stories about women who are, in their mid to late 30s who want to have a child, and their bodies are like, yeah, no, you're done. It's a wrap. Should have done that at 22. Sorry. Um, right. And I knew, like, and given how, the hours I kept, like what I did to keep those hours, there's, it was not fertile ground. I couldn't possibly imagine that there was going to be fertile ground here. So I had to, but the change was actually like, I want to be a mother. Now, how do I want to do this and how is this going to work? And like, they just, this job and but again, my goal, like my outward goal, were completely incompatible. And I'm
So
glad
you
I
had
realized
a clear why.
I had a very clear why. I had a very, very clear why. And I guess, I guess I could have had a kid and kept doing the same thing. I don't want to know. I don't even want to think about what that would have looked like, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't make that choice. I'm
How
really-
did you, how was that making that choice for the greater good?
for even in terms of deciding to become a mother,
Yeah. Because
I felt very calm
it's
with it.
you or the kid.
Yeah, no, I was very calm with it. I was like, what was clear is that I wanted the child more than I wanted the practice of law. That was really, really clear to me. I had no idea how it was going to happen, but I knew that that was going to be the case. And at that point, I met the person who I eventually married who said, hey, have you thought about getting a PhD? I was like, that wasn't on my list of things to do, but I think I could do something. Um, right. And so it was good to have another nudge, like, because I didn't know how it was going to happen. I just knew that life as it was not going to happen. It was not, I couldn't continue. I couldn't continue that way.
I'm sure that this episode will be very helpful to a lot of attorneys that want to become mothers
Absolutely.
because,
Or make
yeah,
any big change in your life, right?
they
Like,
change. Yeah.
maybe you're in a big law firm and you're like, this is killing. I heard a story. A friend of mine is a coach. She coaches lawyers, and she said one of her clients had come to her after years of healthcare problems because she had burnt out the inside of her esophagus because she had so much acid reflux.
Yes. Yeah.
I was like, I didn't know that was a thing, but I, I
I
raised.
had that.
Oh my gosh, it must be painful. It must be unbelievably painful.
Yes. Yeah.
Whew.
Yeah. It's due to stress.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe it. I completely believe it. And maybe like maybe you'd like to pass on the acid reflux and come back and do something different. Um, you know, maybe you got the job. Maybe you wanted to become a lawyer because you wanted to travel. Right? Maybe there's like maybe you want to be a parent, right? Maybe you decided maybe you have a hobby. Maybe you're like me and you like to hoard yarn and knit and crochet. Like I don't know, right? But like, or maybe you're a musician on the side, right? And there's something else you want that that's out of whack with what you're doing. And so, yeah, no, that if you're a lawyer who's in that position, I'm here. I'm here for you. I want to help you figure out how to right size work to the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And don't wait
We
until
came
you're about
up
to
with
reflect.
the, yeah, sorry to interrupt. We came up with the constructive escape movement.
I like that.
Yes,
I
and
like that.
we are doing workshops and events for people to find a constructive escape
Yes.
to their life. So
Oh, that's
it's
perfect.
basically whatever you just said. Yes.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I I don't call it that, but like I use tapping, like I'm tapping on the
Tell
points
us
or
about
on
the
the face.
tapping.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know, but please tell us
yeah,
a little bit
absolutely.
about it.
It's the long name for it is emotional freedom techniques, otherwise known as EFT or tapping. And what you're doing is you're tapping on acupuncture points around the head and the face and the hands, um, while you're saying the thing you don't like. So and what it does is it calms. There's a little pea, it's like a pea-sized thing in your brain called the amygdala, and it's the part of the brain that keeps us alive. It also keeps us in fight, flight, or freeze. So what we're doing is we're tapping is we're calming that down. There now. You're okay. You're okay. You're not saying that, but but that's what the amygdala hears, and you can make really different decisions after that's the case. It's one of the tools I've used that gets changes the quickest. I say that because it's been a very effective way of getting people to go, okay, not this way. I'm going over there. It's like awesome. Now what do we need to do to go over that way? So I've used it with clients who are trying to figure out how to leave a marriage, or someone who was in a law firm who had tachycardia and high blood pressure. She right-sized the relationship of her work to her life so she could do roller derby and she could sing in choirs, right? Like those are the kinds of changes that you can see with people when you're not in fight, flight, or freeze all the time.
Right. Because a lot of people are afraid of change just
Mhm.
because they don't know. They don't know that
Exactly.
it actually can be a very good thing.
Exactly. Exactly. And so like I don't
Because of the fear.
yeah. And so what EFT does is like we're not even gonna go
Yes.
we're not even gonna approach the thing you want to do. We're just actually gonna be with the fear and like calm it down so you can actually go, okay, so I'm gonna do this tomorrow. Awesome. Off you pop. Right? Like that's how that's it's very effective that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Um, and now that you're approaching the end, give us a little piece of wisdom or advice for the listeners. What to do if they feel stuck or overwhelmed with fear and stress?
Hmm. I think the first part of it is to actually go into a place of quiet, right? And it's uncomfortable, right? Like y- and I think we fear it because it's all the noises in our head, but actually just decide to give yourself a chunk of time where you can pull away and just be in quiet because that's when your deepest knowing and your guiding star will make itself available. It's not going to be loud, right? The voices that we hear are loud. Sometimes they're crass, sometimes they're mean. Those aren't the voices that are going to tell us our North Star. You're going to sit there until you hear the quiet. And then that'll be really clear what you're doing. Glennon Doyle writes about it in her book. What was the book? The last one she wrote. The last book she wrote. Go find that book. But she talks about how she would literally hide in a closet for a while until I'm not saying you have to do that, but you want that level of quiet so you can actually just find your North Star. That gentle, kind, thoughtful North Star, not the mean. What are you doing? No, no, not those voices.
Be in the now.
Be in the now. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And if you're
because
super
yeah,
stuck, then you have to get help. Then you have to reach out and get help. And like any of us would be happy to help you, right? But that's really important.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, because in the quiet, um, we get the true meaning of what we want to do.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So tell us, where can our listeners find you?
Awesome. You can find me at resistantvision.com, resistant, V as in Victor, ISION.com. You can also find me on Instagram at resistant_vision. You can find me, I call it Twitter, whatever about what it's become. You can find me there at Dion Thompson. So M for Michelle, Dionne, Thompson. I theoretically am on LinkedIn, but you're not going to find me right now because I'm fighting with them. So it's like I, I would direct you there, but I won't. So those are the three places. And if you go to resistantvision.com /speaking, I will have a free gift for you if you are interested. So yeah,
Of course, we'll have all of that information down below. So
awesome. Excellent.
Yeah.
Yes.
don't worry.
Yes. All right. So thank you so much
Thank
for
you. What a
listening.
lovely,
Thank you,
lovely
Michelle,
afternoon.
for being with us.
My pleasure.
Was a true pleasure.
Yes.
And we hope to see you soon.
Awesome. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Take
Bye.
care.